Welcome to episode 2 of the Heated Exchange. My name is Austin Geller, along with my good friend Jett Rosenstein. Jett, how are you, my friend?
I am doing great. We made it to episode number 2. I think that's a big milestone in itself. I'm hoping everyone out there enjoyed our first episode. We covered a lot of great topics. So if you've not already checked that out, please go do so. As for this episode, we have a lot of great stuff for you planned. If Austin, you want to get into that, that would be great.
Absolutely. So today we're going to start off with Jett's stat of the day. Then we're going to get into the Miami Dolphins, which is Jett's favorite team. The reason, I don't know why anyone would want to do that to themselves. And then we're going to get into a player comparison that, frankly, has caught my eye a lot in any mock draft I do. And I think it's very important to dive deeper into it. So without further ado, Jett, floor is yours.
Yeah, before we get into the stat of the day, I just want to talk about some stuff that's been happening outside of this podcast. Austin and I, like we mentioned on last episode, we're in a fantasy football league together, and we just had our draft last night. It was one of the more crazier drafts. I know I'm speaking for Austin as well, that we've both experienced, because this was the first year where keepers were implemented into our league, as well as trading draft picks. So there was a lot of names shuffled all across the board. We did do a live draft, so we had a physical draft board. So we were trying to figure out who was where, and all of that stuff. It was very stressful. We may not be happy with the outcome of our team, but we're excited for the challenge up ahead. Awesome. What did you think of the draft last night?
Look, considering I was missing my 7th, 8th, and 9th round pick, which are very important for depth reasons, I thought I actually had a pretty good draft. Obviously, I wish my team was better, but considering the circumstances, I really can't ask for much more. Obviously, last year I traded this year's draft picks to win the title last year, so it was worth it for me, but now I'm paying the price. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, and as for me, I'm kind of relying heavily on the Cincinnati Bengals, it seems like, because I have three of their core guys on offense in Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, and Jamar Chase. If the Bengals defense lets me down, then my season will go with it. So I'm really hoping that I have high expectations for the Bengals offense, but obviously there are numerous questions. So yeah, like Austin said, we'll have to see what happens. There's a lot of good teams already that were formed in this draft, so it's definitely going to be an uphill battle, but Austin and I are always up for a challenge like this.
Oh, then what? Mixon is your RB1, right?
Mixon is my RB1. After I was considering, so I picked Davante Adams in round 1. Like, I was considering him or Aaron Jones. Obviously, you pay the price when you pass on a top running back, right. And I definitely did pay the price, as my RB2 is Gaskin to go along with my RB1 Mixon. Not an ideal combination, but I'm definitely planning on leveraging Davante Adams out there. Austin, if you are interested, he's definitely on the table.
Yeah, I'm good. I have a great plethora of receivers. I took Tyreek Hill with my 2nd round pick. I also snagged Allen Robinson, and I got Cooper Kupp, who ironically I'm going to be arguing against later in the show, but it is what it is. I think he's going to have a good season, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah, no, that's a good segue for what we're going to be getting into later in the show. But now we're going to get into the stat of the day. We had a stat of the day last week, and we're bringing it back again because it was such a fan favorite topic. So the stat of the day for today is about running backs. Last week we talked about quarterbacks. So since 2014, on average, one running back has repeated as a top 5 running back from one year to the next. This is in PPR formats. In 2020, the top 5 were in this order: Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, David Montgomery, and Aaron Jones, in that order. So, Austin, my question to you: which running back that finished in the top 5 in 2020 is the closest thing to a lock at finishing top 5 in 2021?
Well, believe it or not, I have Alvin Kamara as my repeat top 5 running back. There's a lot of speculation and questions because Drew Brees is gone, and I think I speak for every fantasy manager when I say having Drew Brees in the game last year, if you were a Kamara owner, was a blessing. So all he did was check down to Kamara. However, with Michael Thomas being out for a while now, the fact is I think the Saints are going to have no choice but to incorporate Kamara a lot more into the offense in any way possible. Not to mention, losing Drew Brees, I think it's also going to allow Sean Payton to utilize Kamara in a lot of different ways, whether having him take more deep shots, whether it's giving him more carries. Like, I think Drew Brees, listen, he's obviously one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. However, he couldn't throw the deep ball as well last year, even the year before that. Having Winston out there, who can throw a deep ball, as we all know, I think Kamara's going to be used in a lot more creative ways. I mean, he finished as RB1 last year. He finished as RB8 in 2019, RB4 in 2018, RB3 in 2017. Like, when he's healthy and at his best, he's a top 5 running back every year he's been in the league, except for 2019, where he was hurt. Last year, he was second in targets. He was fourth in running back touches. He was first in receiving yards among our running backs. He was first in receptions. He had nearly 1,000 yards running. He was first in target share among the Saints, and he was first in total touchdowns. He is a definition of volume. Like, he's going to get the volume. They are going to use him. I'm not worried about Taysom Hill this year. I think last year they had to scramble last second. I don't think Taysom Hill really knew what he was doing in those games. He had to come in blindly for a Hall of Fame quarterback. I think this year, the whole preseason, offseason, I just think Kamara is going to be used heavily this year. And volume speaks louder.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can't argue with that, but I do think in this scenario there is a better option. So for me, when I was looking at who I think is the near lock, first I ruled out Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones. The reason being is there's never been, since 2014, there hasn't been a running back that's finished in the top 5 in 3 consecutive years. Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones, if they were to finish in the top 5 this year, which is, very likely could happen again, it would just be going against what has been happening in recent years. So the guy for me is Dalvin Cook. He finished as the number 2 running back in PPR formats last year after finishing number 6 in 2019. The only thing that could prevent him from finishing in the top 5 is he has dealt with injury issues. He hasn't even played a full season up until this point in his career. But despite that, with those injuries, he has been able to finish in the top 5, in the top 7 in 2 of his 4 years in the league. Each of the past 2 seasons, he has accumulated over 1,000 yards, 10 plus touchdowns, and 40 plus receptions. Fun fact, he only has 3 reception touchdowns in his career, which I was a little surprised to see. But with the way the Vikings run their offense, I guess they're not using Dalvin Cook that much when they, getting towards into the end zone to use him as a receiver. Obviously, Cook is going top 2 in every league, and he rightfully so deserves to be. But in regards to Alvin Kamara, I'm a little concerned with how this new look Saints offense is going to present itself. There's a lot of questions, obviously, with the quarterback situation, which you addressed. Whether it's Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston, it's just not going to be the same for Drew Brees. And for that reason, although I do have Alvin Kamara in my top 5, ranked in number 5 for this year, I just think there's too many question marks, and all those question marks could prevent him from repeating as another top 5 performance.
All valid points. Only time will tell, my friend. Only time will tell.
Of course, yeah, it's gonna be very, obviously everyone should be drafting these guys in the top 3 or 4 picks. There's no doubt about it. We'll have to see. Obviously, we were just talking about before we got on here how, like, we saw 2017, there's running backs that some of them aren't even fantasy relevant anymore. So
Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley, Shady McCoy, Mark Ingram. I mean, you don't hear any of those guys anymore. I think it's remarkable. The turnaround in running back.
Yeah, that just goes to show that everyone knows what the running back position is. There's a lot of turnover, so you can't be surprised if you're seeing some of these guys one year and not seeing them the next. That's just the nature of the position, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on going forward. So with that being said, it's time to get into our team preview for the fantasy football upcoming season. Last week, we talked about the Pittsburgh Steelers and the most desirable options in that offense. This week, we are going to be talking about my Miami Dolphins. The expectations are high from a reality perspective, maybe not as much for a fantasy perspective, but there are still some very solid options on this team that I highly advise you to draft on your teams this upcoming year. Austin, who is your guy, if any, on this Dolphins team that you want on all your fantasy rosters?
Well, very similar to last week. There is only one answer to this question, and the answer is Myles Gaskin. Myles Gaskin came onto the scene last year pretty much out of nowhere. He played in 10 games. He only started 6 of them. He finished as RB25. Obviously, that's not an incredible finish. However, he only played 10 games. He averaged 16.4 points in those games in PPR formats on just 18 touches per game. He had nearly 600 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, 41 receptions, which, by the way, was third on the Dolphins. He was the third best receiver on the Dolphins last year. He had 388 receiving yards, which is 7th among running backs, and 2 touchdowns. That's just in 10 games. Now he has a full year. He's the clear-cut RB1. He is ready to take a big stride this year. I love Myles Gaskin.
I can't say I disagree because I drafted him last night in our league in the 4th round. I know that was someone you were heavily targeting.
Bit of a reach, though.
Bit of a reach considering I didn't have a 5th round pick, but yeah, I'm very excited for Myles Gaskin this season. However, there's also another guy on this team that I'm definitely targeting in every league that I can, and that is Tua Tagovailoa. And yes, I get there's a lot of questions surrounding him if he can really evolve into a great quarterback into the NFL. But I do think it's possible. In his rookie season, obviously it was a subpar performance on his end, but there were a lot of variables that led into him having a subpar rookie season. He was coming off of a hip surgery. Like, that's a tough injury to come back from mentally, physically. He just was not there, and it was obvious. He had weapons, but not enough weapons to take him to the next level. He had Parker, he had Gesicki, but now he has Jalen Waddle, Will Fuller, and hopefully Myles Gaskin will be the starting running back for the whole year. Hopefully he stays healthy. That's a big thing. And the biggest thing that Tua needs to do to propel himself to the next level is take more risks. That's the difference, because he was way too conservative last year. And obviously, that maybe helped him in the interception department because he didn't have to risk it that much. But if he's willing to throw the ball downfield and he trusts Jalen Waddle, who is his former teammate in college, Will Fuller, another deep threat, he's going to be a great asset, but to potentially have on your fantasy team. Now, let me be clear here. I'm not saying that you should always be drafting him to be your starter right away, just because there is a little uncertainty with him. But even to draft him as your second quarterback just to see what you can get from him, or for the people that like to wait till the very end to draft a quarterback, he is one of those guys that I would be interested in targeting. From what I've been hearing and what I actually saw at Dolphins training camp, he's been looking great. The amount of touchdowns to interceptions he's thrown is far more than what we saw last year in training camp. I'm very excited for what Tua is going to bring to the table this year. And I have a little bold prediction that I'll get to in a little bit after Austin tells me what he thinks about my Tua Tagovailoa take.
Well, that was a lot. And while I'm not going to say your arguments are wrong, however, how many times have we heard of a young quarterback performing well at camp and it never translates to the field? Fact is, I'm a dire Giants fan. I've heard the past 2 years, Daniel Jones has looked great in training camp, and he has not had great performances on the field. There are a lot of factors to that, but that's another argument for another day. Fact is, last year in 10 starts, again, you're right. Tua is, when I think of the word conservative, I think of Tua. He is the textbook definition of the word conservative.
That's the 2020 Tua, though.
And that's not easy to get over in 2021. It's not easy to get over that. It's all mental. And as we know, an athlete's mental capacity plays a bigger role than an athlete's physical capacity. So last year in just 10 starts, he only averaged 181 yards a game. Like, that's it. He had only 11 touchdowns, which ranked 29th among all quarterbacks. And guess what? He was bottom in the league in yards per attempt. He only averaged 6.3 yards attempt. He had a 71.8 completion percentage, which is average. He only had a 36.4% deep ball completion percentage. Fact is, Gaskin was his guy. And you know what's funny? Tua had an 80% catchable pass rate last year. 80% of his balls were catchable. You know why? Because you threw it 2 feet in front of him. And guess who? To Gaskin, who had 41 receptions last year. Gaskin's going to be the starter all year. Listen, I'm not saying Tua is going to be bad. Obviously, I never root against somebody. I love his comeback story. I hope he plays well. But the fact is, I don't think he has what it takes to let the ball fly. I think he's going to be the same Tua this year, maybe a little better. But the fact is, I think he's going to dump it to Gaskin all game. I think Gaskin will get a heavier workload. There was no one behind him. They signed Malcolm Brown. Fact is, I think he'll just be used on 3rd and inches, 3rd and 1, maybe goal line situations, possibly. But I think there's so much room for Gaskin in the open field. I think he's going to get a ton of volume this year. He averaged 18 touches per game last year. I think this year you'll see the number get to at least 20. And now the full off season and in a year under his belt, I think he's going to just be, honestly, a top 15 running back, maybe even top 10 if all things go well.
Totally get what you're saying. Obviously, like I said, Gaskin is someone I'm targeting in a lot of leagues. Tua is just one of those guys that I want on my team. You were talking about, the catchable rate receivers, were Gaskin right near him. But the thing about his receiving core last year is they were tied for 9th in drops. So I think some of that trust factor just wasn't there with his receivers. He wasn't willing to throw the ball downfield because who would trust someone like a Mac Hollins or like a Jakeem Grant? Because honestly, they can't catch as good as they've showed out in training camp. When you have someone coming in like Jalen Waddle and Will Fuller, hopefully they obviously stay healthy and they perform at the level that we're expecting them to be. I think it's going to be a much better outlook for Tua this season. On top of, we can't forget that last year the Dolphins offensive coordinator was Chan Gailey. Chan Gailey was not willing to unleash Tua. He was Ryan Fitzpatrick was his puppet basically. So with a new offensive coordinator in town, they're gonna let Tua sling it. That is what I'm hoping for. And right now he's going in the 14th round in most leagues, and why not take a stab at him there? And I'll say right now, my bold prediction is that Tua will have the best fantasy season among second-year quarterbacks.
And who are the second-year quarterbacks you're referring to?
Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert.
Okay. All right. Now that we've got our lies and dreams out of the way, what do you really think is going to happen?
First of all, let me explain this to you. So, Justin Herbert obviously had an outstanding year one. But the thing is, defenses are going to learn to adjust to him, and you might see a little bit of a sophomore slump. And in regards to Joe Burrow, he says he's not even there mentally at this point. I know it's still training camp, but if that ACL injury gets to him mentally, he might not be able to perform at the level that we're expecting him to be at.
Okay. However, to say that Tua is going to have a better year than Justin Herbert,
it's a bold prediction.
It's ludicrous, if you ask me. Justin Herbert is a gunslinger. He was one of the best quarterbacks in the league last year. Forget even rookies. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Not only does he have a top 5 receiver in Keenan Allen, he also has Austin Eckler, who's going to give him a lot of extra passing yards, basically, for Herbert. I think he's 10 times better than Tua. I love the bold prediction. However, you are out of your mind. Love you, but you're out of your mind. Again, time will tell. We'll see what happens. But point is, until Tua proves that he actually is willing to throw the ball, past the line of scrimmage, it's Gaskin. It's Gaskin. Gaskin's got to have. He will have the volume every game. He's going to be used in the passing game and the rushing game, all 17 games this year. There was no doubt about it. He showed out this last year. He showed what he can do. He's the guy to have in 2021.
Yeah, I totally get it. I mean, obviously it is a very bold prediction, but I am excited for what Tua has to offer. I think it's going to be a much different story in 2021. Just to give everyone an idea of where I have Tua ranked upcoming into this year, I have him ranked as the number 16 quarterback. Austin has him ranked as the number 23 quarterback. And in regards to Myles Gaskin, I have him ranked at number 15. Austin has him ranked at number 16.
Wow, you ranked him higher than I did?
I did. I honestly though, I think I had him a little higher, but there was a couple of guys like that I had to move up and down, so it caused Gaskin to take a little step back. But I'm as optimistic as you for Gaskin, not just me being a Dolphins fan, but like you said, there's no one behind him in that backfield. Tua is just one of those guys they can get for nothing. So that's why someone I'm targeting.
You know what? As a very late round pick, I don't think it's a bad thing to take Tua. Obviously, the hope is he really does progress this year and takes that big leap forward that a lot of second year guys take. But he's not a guy that I'm looking to have in my team. That's going to be an integral part of my success. If I'm looking for an RB2, I think of Myles Gaskin. He is the definition, especially in PPR formats. He's the definition of RB2 because he's RB1 potential every week.
Understandable. I agree with that. So we have this bold prediction segment recorded on tape. So after the year, we'll see where this stands, and we'll definitely check back in with this. But now we are going to move on to our next segment where we will be comparing two players. Last week we compared Joe Mixon and who was Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Yes, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think I won that debate, but we'll see who wins this debate today. For today, we are going to be debating Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, both receivers for the Los Angeles Rams. Austin, where are you on this side of the debate?
So, like I said earlier, I'm with Robert Woods. Unfortunately, I drafted Cooper Kupp last night, so it's a little contradictory. However, I do think Woods is the better target to have this year, especially with the addition of Matthew Stafford. Obviously, Cam Akers going down for the year. Hope he gets better. Never want to see a guy get hurt like that. But let's go over a few little things from 2020. So Woods was the wide receiver 14. Kupp was wide receiver 26 last year. Woods had 130 targets. Kupp had 125 targets. However, Kupp had 92 receptions. Woods had 90 receptions. The big thing, though, the big discrepancy that I noticed with those two, Woods had 5 more total touchdowns last year than Cooper Kupp. Fact is, touchdowns worth 6 points in most leagues, unless you have a other setting. But Woods is used more in the red zone. He is targeted more in the end zone. They want to get him the ball down there. And I just think with Matthew Stafford, I just got to believe that Woods' targets and receptions and red zone targets are all going to go up this year. Obviously, no Cam Akers. I think they're just going to use him more. Listen, the fact is they're even for the most part. It's like 1A, 1B with them. Take any one of them. I'd be happy with that. But I just think because he is known over the two to get more production in the end zone, I'd rather have the guy that just gets more touchdowns.
Let me take you back to that red zone argument really quick, because it's a little incorrect if you ask me.
So I said end zone. I said end zone argument, not red zone.
Okay, but like here, let me just tell you this. So in 2019, Cooper Kupp was tied for second in the league with 7 red zone touchdowns. Robert Woods only had 4 in 2019. In 2020, Robert Woods had the edge with 4 red zone touchdowns. Cooper Kupp had 2. If we're talking about touchdowns here, Cooper Kupp had 10 in 2019. He only had 3 in 2020. And you know what that means? He's going to have positive regression. He's going to get back up to his mean. 3 is not the number he's going to get every year. He's going to get between the 7 and 9 range, in my opinion, this year. Robert Woods doesn't have as much upside in that department. He's never finished with more than 8 touchdowns in a season.
And that's with who a quarterback?
Jared Goff. Matthew Stafford's going to make them both better, though. So
again, so let's go with your logic. Both receivers have more touchdowns this year. So let's say Cooper Kupp gets to about 7, 8. Robert Woods already had 8 last year. You don't think he'll get to 10? Because you're such a believer in progression. You don't think that Woods will get more touchdowns than last year, especially with Matthew Stafford?
Like I said, if Cooper Kupp is used as much as he was used in the red zone in 2019 in for this upcoming season, Kupp is going to have more touchdowns just on that stat alone.
Okay, let's also not forget Robert Woods also used as a rusher. They love to bring him around the edge on those little jet sweeps and run him out wide. Cooper Kupp does not do that. And that's honestly a big thing for Robert Woods, because he actually found the end zone twice doing that last year.
Well, yeah, so he might not have those rushing yards, but Cooper Kupp, last year he ranked third among receivers in yards after the catch. I mean, that you'll get more fantasy points that way too. So
Fact is, though, I'd rather have a guy. Listen, they're pretty much even in receptions and yards. They're very similar. But the fact is, I'd rather have the guy that looks like he's going to have more touchdowns this year. And because last year, I think Robert Woods really established himself as a touchdown threat on that team. I think he will progress just like Cooper Kupp in touchdowns. But the fact is, Woods will have more this year. I think he'll have 10 or 11 this year, maybe 12 if he's lucky. I think Cooper Kupp will get 6 to 8 this year. But I just think Robert Woods, because he's more of a threat with touchdowns, I just believe Robert Woods is a guy to take first.
I think you have it flipped around a little bit. I think Cooper Kupp is going to see between the 10 and 11 touchdowns this year. Robert Woods is going to see between 6 and 8 because that's where Robert Woods has averaged throughout his career. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about Matthew Stafford. One thing I will point out about Jared Goff, there were several throws during the season last year where as Cooper Kupp would be coming across the field, Jared Goff just could not hit him. Obviously, that can go the same for Robert Woods, and Matthew Stafford is a much more talented quarterback than Jared Goff. We both can agree on that. So obviously, both of their fantasy production is going to see an increase. I think Robert Woods may finish with more yards, but I think Kupp is going to finish with more touchdowns. Well, before you argue a little bit more, this is how I sum up Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. I think Robert Woods is definitely the safer pick. Cooper Kupp definitely has more risk, but I think Cooper Kupp has more upside than Robert Woods.
I agree with you 100%. But listen, I'm a guy, I like to take the safe pick a lot. I like consistency. I know every week what I'm getting from Robert Woods. Yes, there'll be weeks Kupp will have one of those big 30-point games, but it's kind of like Aaron Jones, same kind of way. Aaron Jones will have one of those big weeks, and the next week he'll have like 8 or 10. Woods every week is good for 12 to 16 a game, you can honestly say. Kupp one week will have 8, the next week will have 20. Fact is, I like a guy who I know I'm getting production from. I believe his touchdowns are going to increase this year. I believe his yardage. I believe his receptions. I think all of his stats are going to go up this year, especially with Cam Akers being out. Henderson's actually a good replacement, but he's not Cam Akers. I just think Woods is the safer pick here. I think he's consistently better. Obviously, Cooper Kupp, like I said, he's not a bad pick. He's right behind him. It's literally 1A, 1B with them. I'd be happy with both. I drafted Cooper Kupp basically for the reasons you're giving. I think he'll have a very good season. I honestly have him, I think, as a top 20 receiver this year. Same with Robert Woods, but you're right. Cooper Kupp can have more of one of those big boom weeks, but also worries me, he may not have a great game every game. Robert Woods, every game, you're getting from him. So it's all about really what you value in your leagues.
Right. I mean, right now, Cooper Kupp is going in the 5th round. And at that point, I might be willing to take a little bit of a risk on a guy with top 5 upside. He's finished in the top 5 before. Yes. Robert Woods, while being drafted in the 4th round, hasn't finished above wide receiver 11. So kind of what I'm referring to with the difference in upside. That's just I'm with Austin on this. I'll take both of them in any of my drafts. The Rams offense is going to be insane, especially for fantasy, especially like you were saying without Cam Akers. So you can't go wrong with either of them. Like Austin was saying, it's about value. That's what it comes down to.
Absolutely. What do you right? Would you rather a guy who is going to have a huge game on any given week, or would you rather a guy who he may not have one of those 30-point games ever, but you're going to get 16, 15 points a week from him, and just know, okay, I'm locking him in. I know I can get this from him, and leave it at that. So it's all about really what you value.
I think we both can agree that they're probably one of the most overlooked wide receiver duos every year. Yes,
every year, especially I think Robert Woods, because Cooper Kupp has shown in the past. I think he ended up as a top 5 wide receiver 2 seasons ago.
Yes.
I want to say.
Yes.
And obviously he got hurt too, right?
He got hurt in 2018. He tore his ACL.
Right. Yeah. So that's why Woods has stayed healthy for the most part. I don't think he's had any catastrophic injury.
He resurrected his career in Los Angeles after doing nothing in Buffalo. So
thank God, good for him.
Yeah.
But again, take either of them. If you want consistency, go with Robert Woods. If you want to take more of a risk and then go with Cooper Kupp because he'll have a good season, but you may not get the same production every week from him.
Yeah, so just to give everyone an idea where Austin and I both have Woods and Kupp in our rankings, I have Robert Woods at number 10, and I have Cooper Kupp in number 14. Austin has Woods at 12 and Kupp at 19.
There you have it. And by the way, just out of curiosity, even though we're past it, what's your prediction on the Dolphins this year? On the record?
Well, I'm a lot more optimistic now that we were able to resign Xavier Howard. I'm thinking that 11 and 6, I think it might be a little exceeding a little of my expectations, but I think 11 and 6, 10 and 7 is where they're going to finish. I do.
That Miami Sun really must be getting to you, huh?
Where do you think they'll finish?
Are all Dolphins fans this delusional? Really?
I just have faith in my quarterback. There's a lot of Dolphins fans out there that are already writing off Tua and saying it was a mistake taking Tua over Herbert. I get that, but everyone needs to relax, as Aaron Rodgers would say. It's only been 1 year with Tua. We've seen quarterbacks like Peyton Manning have awful rookie seasons. Not saying Tua Tagovailoa is going to be Peyton Manning, but I still think the sky's the limit for him.
He has not shown any of the tools that he could be an elite quarterback. He has not shown it last year. He was so conservative. I understand coming up an injury, but he didn't even try to take a risk down the field. He didn't bother. Fitzpatrick had the same teams, had the same receiving course as Tua, and yet the offense actually played better with Fitz last year. They actually averaged more points per game with Fitz, with the same receivers, the same personnel. But Fitz actually was not afraid to put the ball down the field. Tua was. The fact is, it didn't obviously look. If he actually turns it around, his mental abilities, and he's actually not conservative this year, there's a different conversation. But until I see that, Gaskin's it's going to be Gaskin, and the Dolphins are going to struggle.
I totally understand. Obviously, the biggest thing, nothing physically. It's all going to be mentally. If he's willing to take those shots down the field, that's going to be the difference in not only Tua's fantasy outlook, but the hopes of Dolphins making a playoff run this year, because they do have to deal with the Bills and potentially the Patriots in that division. So,
by the way, don't overlook the Jets this year either. Obviously, they're not going to make the playoffs. No, they're not going to make the playoffs, but they're not going to be an easy win. They will be one of the teams that you're like, shoot, we have to play them this week.
Well, what are you thinking? Like, how many wins do you think they'll get?
The Dolphins?
The Jets.
17, I think, 17 games. I got to say, I go 5 or 6 this year.
Well, that depends on Zach Wilson. So
I think the Jets with Robert Saleh, I think they're going to have a very good year. I love Michael Carter. I wish I got him in the draft.
Same.
Fact is, I love Elijah Moore. Unfortunately, he got a little hurt recently, but I love him this year. Corey Davis, I think he will have a resurgence this year on this Jets team. Jamison Crowder, he is Mr. Consistent every year. Zach Wilson, see what he has, but I think the Jets also with a better defense this year. I think everyone's locked in. They have that underdog mentality. I think they're good for 5 to 6 wins, and I think they'll play a lot of teams tough this year, including the Dolphins. You know, the 2 times I played them this year.
Very, very interesting. I think that none of those weapons are going to be good. And obviously, if it all depends on Zach Wilson, and I don't know if Zach Wilson has what it takes to take in the NFL. And obviously, he's yet to have a snap in an NFL game yet, so I can't say too much about it. But it's definitely going to be interesting how the AFC East shakes up and all the divisions around the league.
By the way, I will bet you right now, I'll make a bold prediction. Zach Wilson ends the year with more passing yards than Tua.
Oh, whoa.
In front of everyone's a witness right now. I am making a bold prediction that he will have more yards than Tua this year.
I'll take that deal. I will.
Take that deal? I'll bet you $20 right now that Wilson has a better year passing than Tua.
Well, here's the thing though. I mean, the Jets are going to be behind every game, so obviously you're going to have to throw the ball. Dolphins have a better defense, so that they're going to be ahead in a lot of games.
Dolphins may not be ahead in a lot of games this year.
I think the defense is going to be just as good as last year. So
are you not taking my bet?
I'll take the bet. I will.
All right. Well, everyone here, you're a witness. You see it. We'll check back in after week 18 when I get my $20. Jett, you're on. You're on.
All right. Yeah. So this was episode number 2 of the Heated Exchange. I think for episode 3, I think Austin and I may do a mock draft. I think it's time to get a mock draft out there with it being towards the middle to end of August, we want you to see how we draft so we can help you out in your draft. Austin, anything before we get out of here?
Honestly, for those of you who have not had your draft yet, tune in next week for us. We're going to be, like Jess said, we'll be doing a mock draft. And also this podcast brought to you by Blitzalytics. Please go check out the page. I think you'll find some really helpful information there for your upcoming drafts and for the season when it begins. And everyone, take care.
Yes, everyone have a great day, and we appreciate you listening, and we will see you next time. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.